Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome our viewers on Torah Anytime as well. Erev Chanukah, special time. Okay, so first we're going to begin with a few shalos halach l'maisa that came up. The first shalah that was asked was about a Sephardic fellow, a wonderful Sephardic guy, who intermarried to an Ashkenazi. No, it's not. God forbid. Chas v'shalom. That's not an intermarriage. As a matter of fact, my girls last night, some of my girls, they asked me. They were playing with these very, very sweet, precious girls, and that were Sephardic girls. And the girls asked them, "Are you Sephardi?" So they came to me and said, "What are we, Ashkenazi or Sephardi?" So I was very flattered and complimented that they had no idea. They didn't even dawn upon them to think that there was a bridge or a divide or any type of discrimination. So I told them, I said, what? I said, what are we, Sephardi or Ashkenazi? I said, we're everything. That's what we are. We're everything. And the truth is we are everything. I mean, if I trace my ancestry from my maternal grandmother's side, she was actually Turkish, Jewish, Sephardic. Her father was Yerushalmi for many centuries, but that's Sephardic. Most of us, in my family, from Poland. Where do you think they came from before Poland? Do you think they were in Poland for thousands of years? I know we felt like it, and as a matter of fact, it was, Poland was called the safe haven of the Jewish people. As a matter of fact, Poland was a contraction of Polina, means that here we've achieved serenity or security. This is a place that we retired. But as a matter of fact, most Jews came from Spain to Poland, and Spanish Jewry was, of course, Sephardic. So a guy wants to know, he's Sephardic and his in-laws are Ashkenaz, and they invited him for Shabbos Chanukah to go to a hotel with them. And the Ashkenazic, it's operated by Ashkenazic Balabatim, in other words, the owners or the operators of the tour of the hotel program, Ashkenaz, the caterers Ashkenaz, and he wants to know if it's any issue. You say, what could possibly be the issue? Well, there is an issue. It's a very serious issue, and that is that, you see, if a Gentile cooks food, and he has every ingredient is kosher, nothing wrong with the ingredients, everything is kosher. So, let's say it's very neutral ingredients. He puts garlic into the thing, and he puts, whatever he puts into it. He puts, the meat is totally chasidische shchita, glot, kosher. But the issue is that, technically speaking, empirically, intrinsically, the food is kosher. You could eat it. But there's a problem, because the rabbis made a safeguard. And the rabbis made a fortress around Judaism, saying that they're afraid of assimilation, afraid of genuine intermarriage, God forbid, with someone that's not Jewish. And the way that they felt that they could prevent it was through limiting certain type of socialization. And the fact is, it's interesting that we're speaking about this in Erev Chanukah, because really Chanukah is the premier anti-assimilation holiday, more than any other holiday, because it was a holiday when the Jews did assimilate, as we spoke about previously. You had the Misyavnim, that were the Hellenists, Jewish Hellenists, and you had the Yavanim, that were the Greeks. And unfortunately, it developed and it evolved into a civil war, and it's a gory holiday. And anybody today that is living basically a double life, and that is, in a sense, that is not living according to true Jewish principles, and has his cake and eats it too, is basically, it's a little duplicitous. I'm not saying that, that every Jew should celebrate Hanukkah, but Hanukkah became a very watered down and diluted holiday. It became a hallmark, commercialized holiday, where it's, I think, the most celebrated Jewish holiday, because I guess it's the easiest. What do you have to do? Aside from the gift giving, that makes it a challenge. But truly, Hanukkah, if you really think about it, Hanukkah should be the hardest holiday, because it's a time that we have to really make a decision, and we can't equivocate, and we have to be decisive, and we have to decide that I'm going to stand Mila Shem Elai. Mila Shem Elai means Mila Shem Elai. Whoever is for God, come on my side. Mi kamocha b'elam Hashem. Maccabees, mi kamocha b'elam Hashem means that you're asserting and you're pledging your allegiance to God. So we Jewish people, for a long time, we've been, in a sense, have split allegiance. We're Jewish gastronomically because we eat Jewish food. We're Jewish cardiologically, I guess, cardiac Jews because we feel Jewish in our hearts. But too many of us, we're not Jewish in practice enough. and we forgot about our Jewish values. So Chanukah comes along, and Chanukah says you got to decide which side you're on. Are you on the God's side? And it's a very serious holiday. It's a holiday when you can really make resolutions and make commitments and have conviction to decide: are you on God's team? Are you on Team Hashem? So this was a safeguard. It's called Bishul Akum. It means that you're not supposed to eat from a Gentile's cooking, and in order for us to be able to eat from a Gentile's cooking, because obviously there are chefs and there are cooks and there are butlers and there are maids in our lives and there are health aides. Everybody should be healthy and well, but many times many families do have health aides, and this engenders the issue of how do you revolve around that? How do you work around the fact that many times we have wonderful Gentiles in our lives that are providing our food for us? Cooks in restaurants comes up all the time. Most domestic help. So Chazal told us that it could be potentially okay. Now it happens to be that the Rabbeinu Nisim Gaon, the Ran, as well as the Rivosh and the Rajba, they all say that it's not sufficient for a Jew to just light a flame. The Ravan and the Mordechai hold, these are great eminent early authorities in Judaism and halachic authorities, Rishonim. The Ravan and the Mordechai said that all you have to have is the Jewish involvement with the cooking. Just basically very minimum type of involvement. And this way, it's not under the shlit, it's under the jurisdiction of the guy. And it's a Jewish type of food, and you don't have to worry. And therefore, even if the Jew turns on the flame, it's sufficient. That's okay. However, the Ran, the Rivosh, and the Rajba say that's not sufficient just to turn on the flame. The Jew has to take the pot and participate and intervene much more in the cooking process. He has to actually take the pot and put it on the flame. Now, according to the Ravan and the Mordechai, it seems that any type of facilitating the cooking would also help, not just turning on the flame. So, for example, if the flame is on, but it may not be sufficient to cook, and you turn the flame up, you enhance the flame, or you stir the food, any type of facilitation, any type of participation in the cooking process would also be good. But the Ran, the Rivosh, and the Rajba are very strict that it has to be much more involvement, and that's how the Shulchan Aruch passes. The Code of Jewish Law, Rabbi Yosef Karo, who all these Sephardic authorities follow, that's what they follow. That it's not merely sufficient to turn on the flame. However, the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserles, who most Ashkenazic Jews follow, mainstream Ashkenazic Jews follow the Ramah. Rabbi Moshe Isserles, the chief rabbi of Krakow of Poland. Rabbi Yosef Karo was in Sfat in Israel. So the Ramah says that any type of involvement would be sufficient, especially it's okay to turn on the flame. Now, this has implications. This has consequences. Because if a person follows Sephardic law, then he can't just go into any Ashkenazi restaurant where they rely upon the fact that the Goysha, that the Gentile help, is just turning on the flame and making the food in that process, in that way. And therefore, you'll notice that if you go to, especially restaurants in the King's Highway area, where many Persian, Syrian, and Libyan, and all types of Middle Eastern Jews live, you'll notice it says Bishul Beis Yosef, that the cooking happens through Beis Yosef. Beis Yosef refers to Rabbi Yosef Karo, where there's more involvement, more participation, more intervention in the cooking process, which satisfies the need for Sephardic Jews. What happens, though, when a Sephardic Jew wants to go to an Ashkenazi restaurant, or in our case, the person asked a question that he wants to be with his family, he wants to be with his in-laws, he wants to be with his family, his wife's family, his family now, for Chanukah, when they're going to be in a hotel, and the hotel, the chefs, the cooks, the help will be Gentile. And they're going to be relying upon the Ramah that says that just turning on the fire is sufficient. So, Rabbi Vadi Yosef, who was, I guess, the most preeminent Sephardic authority of our generation, he had at his funeral almost 1 million people, 800,000 Jews. Largest funeral in the history, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, I think it was the largest funeral in the history of the state of Israel, even before it became a modern state, which is astounding. And he was a man that rose through the ranks. He didn't have the impeccable. I mean, Hashem, not to question his pedigree. I'm saying, but he didn't have illustrious. He didn't have yichus, what we call big lineage or anything. He worked very, very hard to attain all the wisdom that he accrued, and he was loved by the masses. He used to do a lot of outreach. He would travel the breadth and length of Eretz Yisrael, all over there, going to seculars, going to all different types of people, teaching Torah. And the proof was in the pudding. At everybody at his funeral, even people that were not religious, they felt a connection. They felt a love for him. So Rav Yosef has a very, very controversial psak, because other great poskim amongst them, Rav Chacham Ben Zion Abba Shaul, who was a great Sephardic giant, Torah sage. I have very fond memories. Baruch Hashem, I had the schus of sitting right next to, because my father was a chacham in the Sephardic world, and we brought them. They came to visit, and I have very, very fond memories. They were great giants, tremendous spiritual giants. Chacham Ben Zion Abba Shaul did not agree with Rav Yosef's psak. But Rav Yosef says like this. He says, first of all, you have to understand that there's a world of Rishonim, of great authorities, that say that turning on the fire would be sufficient in order to mitigate the issue of the Jew cooking versus non-Jew cooking. And therefore, that's one side, that's one facet, that's one component to be lenient. Then he says that there are great authorities that hold that if you have a non-Jew operating, a non-Jew servicing a Jewish household, there's no fear of assimilation. Assimilation is when the Jew basically does some kind of insurrection. What does it mean, insurrection? The Jew goes ahead and goes into the non-Jewish world. And that's the fear that the Jew will adopt and adapt and acclimate himself or herself, acculturate to the non-Jewish world. But when the non-Jew is within the Jewish domicile and the Jewish home, then we're not afraid that the Jew will adopt and adapt the non-Jewish practice. And therefore many poskim say, we don't paskin like this, that the non-Jew is working in the Jewish household. You don't have to be worried about the potential assimilation, and therefore there's no bishul akum, there's no concern. And so assuming all the ingredients are kosher, there's no problem with eating that food. And yet there's another opinion, and that is that the whole edict of bishul akum was never in regards to non-Jewish help. Non-Jewish help are considered to be under the rulership, so to speak. I don't mean, drastic, rulership as far as like a monarchy or anything. I'm saying the rulership, I mean the bias, the ownership of the Jewish employer. When are we concerned about assimilation happening? When they're on equal turf, when they are colleagues, when there is a collegial, when there is a camaraderie, when there is something that they're equal. However, if it's a non-Jew employed by a Jewish authority, then many poskim say, and there are even poskim like this b'di'evid, that if you have a domestic help in the house, now, please don't take this as a psak, but the Ramah does say, in situations where you have domestic help, you have a clean lady, you have a babysitter, you have a maid, you have a butler, whatever it is. I don't know if anybody in Brooklyn has a butler. Well, you never know. Some of these nice mansions there, right? But you think about it, a lot of people, many of us have different types of helpers. So you say that there's no concern about any type of assimilation, and therefore won't be an issue. So says Rav Yosef, this becomes a sveka basically. That's a suffix whether halacha is actually, like the Rishonim that say that you actually have to intervene and participate and involve yourself more in the cooking, but others say just turning on the flame is good. So that's a suffix. It's a suffix whether or not an employee, there's any concern about assimilation. And therefore, since you have a sveka, he says, in a case of, let's say, extenuating, it's not such extenuating circumstances or duress, but in a case where, you want to participate more fully after a restaurant, whatever it is, then you're allowed to rely upon those opinions. Again, it's a controversial psak. Not everybody agrees with it, but of course, one could rely upon the great authority, Ravad Yosef. And therefore, I mentioned to the fellow that he could rely upon Ravad Yosef, then he could go, first of all, for Shalom Bayis. That's certainly, imagine him being the only in-law child that's not going, to the party. Forget about it. He lost his inheritance. Inheritance. Forget about the inheritance. He's making problems in the family. Shalom Bayis, nothing greater than Shalom. As a matter of fact, Shalom Bayis, do you know that if you only have a Chanukah candle, if you have a Shabbos candle, you forget about Chanukah. You use it for the Shabbos candle. Why? Because the Shabbos candle represents peace in the house. Because otherwise, and back then in the dark ages, right, they didn't have electricity. So if you didn't have a Shabbos candle, people would trip on one another and they'd bang into one another, and there would be a lot of tumult and there would be a lot of fighting. So therefore, they say that Shalom Bayis is so important that it supersedes Chanukah. That's how important Shalom Bayis is. And it's something to reflect upon, the importance of Shalom Bayis. Okay, now the next shiloh that involved Chanukah, again, it's a little tangential to Chanukah, of course, but it came up about Chanukah that there's a woman asked me that she was invited to a Shabbos Chanukah party locally, but she has a baby and she doesn't, carry the baby on Shabbos. And she wants to know, she's hiring a babysitter to watch the baby so she could participate in a family Chanukah celebration, Shabbos Chanukah celebration. But she wants to know about hiring the babysitter for Shabbos. Now, you'll say, what's wrong? Well, hiring somebody, paying for somebody for a Shabbos service, we don't work on Shabbos. The reason why we don't work on Shabbos is because there's a rabbinic injunction called Schar Shabbos, getting paid for a Shabbos activity. So you'll ask, but basically, none of us, thank God, all of us, we take off except for me. I have to work on Shabbos, right? Rabbis work on Shabbos. But let's say you think about it, let's say a Baal Kriya. Many of them get paid for their services. All right, so we get there. So he reads a Torah. He's a Torah reader, and he gets paid. So how's he allowed to get paid? A chazan, right? We pay the chazan to officiate, to lead the services. How's he allowed to get paid? Schar Shabbos, he's getting paid for working on Shabbos. So there is a special dispensation, a special exemption for people that are involved in mitzvah. The Rishonim say that if it's a mitzvah type of activity, then there is, again, not everybody holds of it. The shofar blower. Shofar blower gets paid for blowing the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. There is an opinion that says that if he takes money for blowing the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, he'll never see any siman bracha. He'll never see any type of blessing from that money. It's very inauspicious and can be detrimental to him. Chas v'shalom, he could suffer from it, getting paid for doing something on Shabbos. So it's a little of a dispute whether it's totally kosher because it's a mitzvah, or even though you're doing a mitzvah, better not to get paid. But mention a waiter. A waiter works on Shabbos. So there is a heter, and the heter is the fact that it's called havlah, which we've spoken about before. Havlah means that the payment that he gets for working on Shabbos is subsumed, is enveloped in the work that he does either pre or post Shabbos, preferably pre-Shabbos, according to most Rishonim Achronim. Some say that post Shabbos doesn't work; it has to dafka be pre-Shabbos. Although there are many Achronim that say that post Shabbos is also considered to be acceptable. But anybody that's working on Shabbos, you're not paying them strictly for working on Shabbos. You're paying them, it's subsumed, it's enveloped, havlah. Literally, havlah means swallowed up. It's swallowed up into the work that's being performed before Shabbos as well. So, for example, somebody that's laning, that's a Torah reader, he has to engage in a lot of preparation. All right, unless he's got a photographic memory, which many of them do, by the way, but not all of them. But remember, there's no cantillation notes. There's no musical notes in the Sefer, in the Torah scroll. There's no vowelization at all. The Torah scroll is not allowed to have it, as a matter of fact, right? So there's a lot of memory, but there's a lot of preparation. From hours and hours and hours of preparation that go into it. And so he has to prepare. So therefore, you're not paying him for the reading the Torah, necessarily you're paying him for the work beforehand. A waiter that strictly comes on Shabbos and cleans up and serves on Shabbos. If he's coming to deliver the food before Shabbos, you got some kind of exemption going on. But let's say he doesn't. And what about a babysitter? So I told this woman, I said, very simple. Let her come and do some babysitting before Shabbos, after Shabbos, and you're not paying her for the Shabbos, necessarily the babysitting, you're paying her for the before. She says, no, it's impossible. There's no way that she can come before Shabbos or after Shabbos. It's not going to happen. She's only coming on Shabbos. Oy vey. Right? So that's an issue. That's a problem. And you can think about many scenarios like this, that the person is working on Shabbos, and maybe it's not possible for them to come before or after Shabbos. So there are poskim that say, in the Shalosh Teshuvos, that there is a heter. And the heter is like this, is that if let's say the babysitter buys a treat for the child, all right? Now some kids are really rambunctious and rowdy, and they are the nightmare, the dread of any babysitter, right? And there've been books and stories and movies I'm sure made about hiring a babysitter and it goes awry, and the kids end up killing the baby. I don't know, killing, but you get the idea, right? So the babysitter has to, have some bribery and bring some tchotchke, some toys and some treats, okay? Or let's say it's a baby, so the babysitter has to bring a diaper or a formula or something. So when you pay the babysitter, you're not paying for the Shabbos work, you're reimbursing for the whatever tchotchke, whatever thing that the babysitter bought, and also you're subsuming the pay within that. Okay, that's one answer. The other thing is that if you don't stipulate, which could be dangerous, by the way, because they say that good fences make for good neighbors, and a Jew should know that he should never give a loan without, there's a halacha. Don't ever give anybody a loan without witnesses, without making a document, because there are too many relationships that have been severed and that have just been destroyed because people didn't take these safeguards. And even if you're the best friends, even if you're relatives, people have bouts of amnesia. Okay, people get early senility and dementia. I'm telling you, I've seen it. People have come to me with the craziest situations, and it could have all been avoided. It could have all been prevented. So always safeguard, it's an insurance to have witnesses. And this is the Chazal, the Gemara tells us. But let's say you hire a babysitter, you don't make up in advance, you don't say what the payment will be. All right, so that basically, what you're allowed to do is that you're allowed to add on to, in other words, since you didn't stipulate what the payment will be, then after Shabbos, you're giving her a gift. So you're not giving the payment for the actual babysitting, you're giving a gift. And that's another heter, that's another exemption, that's another allowance in order to be able to do it, and with the waiter as well, to be able to do it. Now, So that was the psak for this the situation. The babysitter is told her that gave her these different options to do. Obviously, the preference is to get another babysitter, not to rely upon these type of dispensations. If it's not absolutely necessary, to get a babysitter that could come before Shabbos or after Shabbos, or both, even preferably. But in this situation, then to rely upon those heterim, those exemptions. Okay, now. I wanted to mention that something that many people do not know about Chanukah, and that is that there was a shiloh that was asked. It wasn't asked to me. It was a famous shiloh that was asked about a soldier who's fighting in the Sahel in the Israeli army. The great soldiers that fight in the Israeli army to protect Medinas Yisrael. And I think that by extension, not only are they protecting Medinas Yisrael, I think they're protecting Jews all over the world. I think that's how we should. That should be our perception of the Israeli soldiers. So the soldier has a furlough where he could get off for a limited time for Chanukah. And the question is that the question that was asked, I think it was asked to Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, if I'm not mistaken, the great Rosh Shlomo Zalman. Most humble, great sage, Shlomo Zalman, that what part of Chanukah should he participate in? Should he light the menorah? Or should he be in shul in the morning, in the services, in the synagogue services, praying? Now, Chanukah, we actually say Hallel. We take a compendium, there's a collection of psalms that we say called Hallel. It means praise and gratitude to God. And it's only said on the great holidays. And it's said also on a more semi type of way on Rosh Chodesh, on the new month, but it's said on the great festivals, Hallel. And we actually say a complete Hallel on Chanukah. like we do at on Sukkos. Okay? By the way, halachically, if a person, it's very interesting, if a person says only half a Hallel, doesn't say the full Hallel on Sukkos, the halacha is that he has to go back. He has to say the full Hallel. And if he made a bracha already on the half a Hallel, the halacha is that he should listen to someone else. He made a blessing on the Hallel, he should listen to someone else reciting the Hallel and making the bracha. And if he can't do that, then he should be maharer beliboy. He should meditate the blessing non-verbally, mentally, in his heart, and then say the full Hallel. Now on Passover, on Pesach, we do not say a full Hallel. It's a partial Hallel. Only the first 2 days do we say a full Hallel. The rest of the days we do not say a full Hallel. Why is that? Why the distinction between Sukkos, Hallel Day, and Passover, Pesach? And the reason for that is that on Sukkos, every single day they brought a new sacrifice. Now you have to understand, when they brought the sacrifices, they brought a total of 70 bullocks, 70 sacrifices. Why 70? 70 was representing all the nations of the world. Sukkos is a very ecumenical holiday. It's a day that we pay homage and to God, but that we pray for the welfare of every citizen, of every country, of every ruler. We acknowledge the fact, we recognize the fact that every human being is created in the divine image, every human being is endowed with divinity, and hopefully feels morality and the obligation to have morality. And therefore, Sukkos, 70 animals representing the 70 nations of the world, but it's pachos v'hoilech, means it's descending. You start off the first day of Sukkos with 13 bull, and then you go to 12, and by day 7, which is a culmination, because even though Sukkos is an 8-day holiday, the 8th day is unique, it's exceptional. It's a day that is more intimate with God, it's called Shmini Atzeres, but by day 7, you're down to 7 bulls. So it's 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, and geometric progression. If it was progression here, it's descension, sort of, but regression. But 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7 is equal to 70. Okay? Now, why is that so interesting? It's because Chanukah is like Sukkos, not like Passover, where we actually say the full Hallel. Why is that? The different opinions. Because first of all, the days of Chanukah were the days of the dedication of the altar in the temple, and there were new sacrifices brought every day. And therefore, we make a full Hallel. It's the full exemplification and personification of joy, because new sacrifices, but also because there was new light. Every day was a miracle. Because there was only sufficient light to last one day, but that light lasted, how long did it last? It lasted 8 days. Every day that the light stayed lit was another miracle. Every day of Hanukkah is another day to celebrate, to be thankful, to have gratitude to God for the fact that there's light. And that's why we say on every single day, but it goes further. Because Beis Shammai was one of the great Talmudic authorities. He says that you don't light 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That would be geometric progression. Rather, you light 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, which we don't do. Why? He says because the same way on Sukkos is 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. He says Hanukkah has a very strong similarity and it actually is correlated with Sukkos. Why? How is that? So I saw in the great Rishonim to say, you won't believe it, that Chanukah, the reason why it's 8 days, because the famous question of the Beis Yosef, what's his famous question? Why do you celebrate Chanukah for 8 days? It should only be 7 days. They found oil for 1 day, and it lasted another 7 days. The miracle wasn't 8 days, the miracle was 7 days, because they had enough oil for 1 day. The fact, miraculously, it stayed lit for 7 more days, really, Hanukkah should only be 7 days. So Rishonim say, no, the reason why it's 8 days is because it's akin and equivalent to Sukkos. Because the Jewish people were not able to celebrate Sukkos during the Greek oppression. They were running for their lives. And they were hiding. And therefore, they couldn't celebrate Sukkos. So a substitute for Sukkos was Hanukkah. And that's why Hanukkah was 8 days. You won't believe it. According to some authorities, they actually took the lulav on Hanukkah and they would encircle the altar with the lulav on Hanukkah, because Hanukkah was not only commemorating the miracle of Hanukkah, of the light, it was also a substitute for none other than the miracle of the fact that they had Sukkos back. So now, going back to the question of a soldier who has a furlough, he could only get off for one period, So what should he do? Should he do the lighting of the menorah, or should he do Hallel? You won't believe it. Rav Shlomo Zalman brings down a sheet. I don't know if he passes like this, but he says that Hallel is more important. Praising Hashem, giving gratitude to God, and reciting Hallel is more important. It actually surpasses and supersedes lighting the menorah, which I think resonates well as in consonance with the Chasam Sofer. Because the Chasam Sofer says that many people say that Chanukah is not a biblical holiday. He says indeed it is. Because in the Bible, the Torah gives us a command that we have to thank God for a victory. If we have to celebrate life, we have to celebrate the fact that the Torah is paramount and that we were able to conquer our oppressors and our enemies, and that Torah prevailed. He says that's a biblical mandate. And therefore he says celebrating Chanukah is a biblical holiday. Imagine that. He says you could choose any facet you want, whether it's eating a donut. Don't eat too many donuts. I'm telling you. I'm warning you now. Okay? Oh boy. You know, some people really take that, you know, especially look at these ads in the Jewish papers now. You see, like, the donut. It is so Greek. I'm telling you that these ads are so Greek. The Greeks were all into, you know, the physical. We're supposed to be into the spiritual, all right? So you should show a picture of the Torah on Hanukkah, not a picture of the donut and the latke on Hanukkah, okay? But all right, you know, as a matter of fact, because the Greeks tried to diminish our Torah learning, it's brought down on Hanukkah, you should even learn more Torah. Much more Torah. It's also an Indian to actually give more charity, as much charity as possible in Chanukah as well. But back to the basics. Let's get back to this. So Rav Shlomo Zalman says that it's more important to say Hallel than lighting the Chanukah menorah. So therefore, I don't know if he passes like that, but that's the opinion that he brings down. And therefore, it's very important that when you say as much emphasis as we put on when we light the menorah, we're going to put a lot of emphasis. And the reason why we can put so much emphasis, I'll explain in a minute, we're going to put a lot of emphasis, because that light is not just a typical light. That light is light that's emanating from the heavens. How do I know that? I'll tell you how I know that. Because you see, the Kana Kemach, Rabbeinu B'chaya, he brings down the fact that if you look at the temple, everything was 8. And a lot of Judaism is 8. How do we know that? He says there are 8 vestments that the Kohen, right? 8 vestments. There's 8 musical instruments that the Levi plays. He says there's 8 staves of the Arum. The ark had 8 badim. Badim are staves or are poles, right? He says that there are 8 fragrant spices in the anointment oil, and also in the incense offering. There are 4 and 4, a total of 8. Then he also says that the korban, the sacrifice, the animal sacrifice in the temple was not allowed to be brought until it reached maturity of 8 days old. And of course, even for prophecy, divine prophecy, there are 8 partitions. There are 8 different, basically prerequisites for achieving prophecy. That's also 8. And of course, we have the tzitzis. There are 8 strings of tzitzis. In our tzitzis garment, we have 8 strings. And of course, circumcision is 8 days. So why is it then that if 8 is so pervasive and 8 is so endemic to the temple, to the Beis HaMikdash, why did the candelabra, the menorah, only have 7 cups? 7 branches. And why does the menorah that we light have 8? If we're trying to commemorate the menorah of the temple, then why does it always have 8? Okay, so it was an 8-day miracle, but really it was only a 7-day miracle. As a matter of fact, the Gemara in Erechin tells us on page 13 that there will be a musical instrument, the kinnor. The kinnor is like the harp, that there will be a harp in the time of Mashiach that will actually have 8 strings. Because 8 is the number of transcendence. 8 is transcendental. In the time of Mashiach, we will transcend all types of nature. So in the menorah and Chanukah, it was trying to teach us that the light is not complete. That even if you have a temple, the light is incomplete. Because until Mashiach comes, the world is imperfect. You know, there's a I don't know if I ever told you the story about, you know, the Bab Rebbe. I mentioned the story that there was a Hasidic Jew from Borough Park that hired a painter to paint his house. He had a very palatial house, very, very opulent house, beautiful house, and he hired what he thought was the best painter, and he sat the painter down, a black man, and he said to him, he says, I want you to know, he says, I expect perfection. There's no room for error with my house. And the black man turned to him, and the black man said, I see you have a painting of my Rebbe. The guy looks and says, the chassid says, your Rebbe? He says, my Rebbe. He says, but anyhow, he says, well, since when does a black man have a Rebbe? So the black man says, he's my Rebbe. He's my Rebbe. He says, what do you mean he's your Rebbe? What do you mean he's your Rebbe? How's he your Rebbe? He says, one of the first jobs I had, painting, was in the Bava Rebbe's house. He says, unlike you, who sat me down at his dining room table to give me a musar shmooze, to tell me off and tell me that I expect, there's no room for error and I expect perfection. He sat me down, he fed me breakfast the first thing in the morning. The Bava Rebbe, he could have hated anybody that wasn't Jewish. Remember, he went through the Nazis. An amazing book written about his account. Tremendous miracles that occurred to him. He rebuilt the whole borough park. I mean, think about it. Borough park, Bobov, before the other Hasidim came, I mean, he was in Crown Heights, but he could have despised anybody that, he could have viewed as every person as a potential tormentor. He believed he had faith in humanity, no matter what he went through. The man served the man breakfast, and he said to him, he says, I want you to know. He says, I know you're nervous about this job. He says, I want you to know. He says, I don't expect perfection. He says, because until there's a third temple, there's no such thing as perfection. Everything is imperfect. He says, so I don't expect perfection. I just expect you to try your very, very best to do the best job you can. So even in the temple, the first temple, the second temple especially, there was no such thing as perfection. And therefore the candelabra, the light, the menorah, it wasn't the perfect light. But there will be a perfect light, and that's the light of Mashiach. Our menorahs, when we light them, and now I think I know this sounds, very fanciful, and it sounds mythical. It's not. When we light a menorah, we're bringing down the primordial light. You see, there was a light that burned for 36 hours for Adam, the primordial man. And that light then was concealed by God, and the Gemara in Chagiga, Talmud in Chagiga says that it was reserved for later on. That's the light that we tap into when we light the menorah. And therefore, we light 8. Because we are experiencing the transcendental. And it's a transcendental that would, Bez Hashem, culminate eventually with the coming of Mashiach. But there's something very interesting I have to share with you. And that is that as great as the miracle that occurred of Chanukah, and it was led by the Chashmonaim. The Chashmonaim were these amazing Jews that were scholars. They were probably great rabbis with big beards. I mean, imagine Rav Moshe Feinstein, the great Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, right? Who was basically a little under 5 feet, okay? Imagine him making a whole revolt and, being a soldier and, fighting the Greek Empire. And this is what happened. Now, I don't know if the Maccabees were under 5 feet tall. They may have been closer to 6 feet tall, okay? But imagine Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. This is what happened. It's an amazing miracle. But I have to share with you. Okay, so I have to share with you what happened, and that is that what happened to these Maccabees? The camera. What happened to these Maccabees? What happened to these Chashmonaim? They had a terrible, bitter fate. The Ramban Nachmanides says that as great as these people were, 103 years before the destruction of the Second Temple, Hortus, otherwise known as King Herod, he did a massacre. He obliterated, he decimated this family. And there's no vestige, there's no remnant of this family. That's what Ramban says. Which is something that is exceedingly confounding to understand. I mean, think about it. They were the greats. They were the saints. They were the giants. They caused the resurgence, the renaissance of the Jewish people. They salvaged the Jewish people. And there should be no one left of them? As a matter of fact, the Chasam Sofer, it's brought down the Sefer Chut Mashulish by the Chasam Sofer's grandson. He says something astounding, historical. He says, if you study the Talmud, there's 2,711 pages in the Talmud. In a week and a half, we could be completing the whole entire Talmud. Over 100,000 Jews getting together in MetLife Stadium and Barclays and different places. Amazing. 2,711 pages of Talmud. 36 tractates. 36 tractates, by the way, magical number, because if you count, remember we spoke about geometric progression. We light 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you total it all up, the totality is 36. So for 36 tractates. Thank you. So he says, but if you look at all the tractates, there's no tractate Chanukah. There's no Mishnah. Now, if you study the Shas, you study the Talmud, Chanukah is mentioned around 7 times in different Masechtas, in Bikurim, in Baba Kama, different Masechtas, yes, it's mentioned. But it's mentioned almost cryptically. It's mentioned tangentially. It's mentioned basically in a more obscure way. Why there's no Mishnah? The Chasam Sofer says something very controversial. He says, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, who's the author of the Mishnah, he descended from the house of Judah, and he viewed it as an affront. The fact that the Hashmonaim that ended up setting up a kingdom in the Jewish people, they were Levites. They weren't from Judah, they were from the tribe of Levi. And it was very irreverent, and it was very sacrilegious. That they went against the Torah, because the Torah says, Lo Yasser Shevet Yehuda, that there should never ever be another house of royalty other than the tribe of Judah. And this is some Sofer says Rabbi Nasi was a personal vendetta. That's what it sounds like. But God forbid, to accuse Rabbi Nasi of engaging in personal vendetta, he was so great. They said that he was the most humble of all men. He was a holy scholar and sage. I mean, talking about Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Aruch, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was generations before, much closer to Sinai. He eclipsed them in greatness and holiness. So obviously, it doesn't mean that can't be the true reason. So, what may be the reason why? So the Vilna Gaon, it's brought down from the Vilna Gaon's son, Rabbi Avraham, the son of the Vilna Gaon, that there are 15 especially ancillary tractates. Amongst the 15 ancillary tractates is 7 minor tractates. And amongst those 7 minor tractates, according to the Vilna Gaon, there was a Maseches Chanukah. There was a tractate Chanukah, which solves the mystery, which solves the problem. The only thing is that it's not extant, and no one knows about it. And it seems that he had his own repository or repertoire that we're not familiar with at all. We're not familiar with it at all. However, there's another opinion brought down. And the other opinion that's cited is the opinion of the Eidus B'Yosef, who says that the reason why Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, did not record the miracle of Chanukah, make a tractate for it, and explicitly have a Mishnah devoted exclusively to Chanukah, fascinating reason. Is because Rabbi Yehuda Nasi lived not too long after the revolt against the Greeks. He lived at the time when actually the more immediate revolt was actually Bar Kokhba revolting against the Romans, Roman hegemony. And he was frightened to record any type of revolt, any type of coup that involved Jewish people, because the repercussions could be very, very bad. And they could have been sadistic against them. And therefore, he felt that he has to play it safe and not write. As a matter of fact, Esther, the story of the genocide of the Jews in Persia, Esther contemplated that as well and deliberated about that. They were afraid to write the story of Purim, and Esther wanted it. And Anshe Knesset Gedolah said, well, we don't know if we can do this. It may jeopardize, it may put the Jews in peril, at risk. And Esther said, but anyhow, it's recorded in the Chronicles of Mother and Paras, and that's why they decided to have Megillas Esther. But that's the Eidus B'Yosef. As a matter of fact, the Magid Mesharim. Remember we spoke about Rabbi Yosef Karo, who was the great Sephardic giant, the author of the Code of Jewish Law. So he actually was so holy that he had a visitation, a nightly visitation, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was nightly visitation. All right, so some of us, we get nightly visitations from, if you have little kids that come to into your bed, whatever. But he was on a totally different league, okay? He had a nightly visitation from a great angel, from the Malach of Hashem. And the angel would sit there and learn Torah with him. And then he wrote a book called Magid Mesharim, The Secrets. And in this book, he writes about why it wasn't recorded, the story of Chanukah. And what he says is something very, very fascinating. He says, because Chanukah happened after the seal of Nevuah, after the seal of prophecy. Remember, it happened in rabbinic times. And Purim happened at the time of between the first and second temple. Chanukah was much later. But Purim, at least you had people, Anshe Knesset Gedolah, men of the great assembly, that were prophets, that had prophecy. And therefore, he says that it wasn't mentioned in the Talmud. Very, very fascinating. Others say, and I saw this brought down by several sources, that the reason why Chanukah was never mentioned in an exclusive, devoted and dedicated, Masechta to Chanukah is because since the people were living it was so commonplace, it was so rampant and so pervasive and widespread, they weren't dubious. They weren't doubtful. There was no question about it. And therefore, they had the Torah Shebaal Peh did not have to be, really, according to the strict letter of the law, Torah Shebaal Peh should never be recorded. It's supposed to be something that is unique and exclusive. It's a secret, basically a secret record for the Jewish people. And because otherwise, if it was recorded, it's subject then to even more, it could be subject to corruption. And also it can be subject to revisionism, and it can be subject to the fact that the nations of the world will take it and claim it to be their own, as they did to the Old Testament. Not constitutional, we should call it the Old Testament because it makes it sound like there's a New Testament, to the Torah. So therefore, they say that that's why it was never recorded. But I have to share with you something amazing. We said from the Ramban, Nachmanides, who says that the Chashmonaim, the Maccabees, even though they salvaged the entire Jewish people, they had a very bitter fate. There was not even a remnant of them left. That nobody could claim today to be descendant of the Maccabees. They were all extinguished. They were all decimated. No. So it's not so pashut, because the Ramban, that's the Ramban Shita. However, Rabbeinu Nissim, the Ran, he doesn't hold like that. He says Tama ala Ramban. He says it's a wonder that it's very troubling what Ramban says. That Ma'od, he says very, very much. Because lo hivticha hakasav lihuda, he says when the Torah says lo yasser shem Yehuda, that it will never deviate, that royalty, that monarchy, Jewish monarchy will never deviate from Judah. That's not referring to now, to contemporary time. Obviously he means contemporary times, means that the time of the temple, it means the time of the exile. He says rather, that's referring to, that's referring to maybe the time of Mashiach. He says something very interesting. There's something called a tributary. Tributary means that you're under, let's say, Greek or Roman or Persian hegemony, right? But that the Jewish people have a certain type of, not imperial rule, but they are representatives of the leading Gentile imperial rule, right? He says in that case, the Jewish people, the Chashmonaim, never had imperial rule. They were always tributaries. They always were subjugated and subject to the ruling authorities. It's sort of like Mordechai, who was the king, or Joseph was the viceroy of Egypt. Mordechai wasn't, there wasn't a Jewish theocracy at all, and he wasn't an autocrat at all. He was under the rulership of Pharaoh, or Mordechai under Achashverosh. He says in such a case, that's not. And even if you want to say that you're not allowed to deviate from the house of royalty from Judah, even in times of exile, that's not deviating, because that's not true royalty. That's the Ran. Now, he says that the Rashba Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet, also agrees with the Ran, and he says the Haftach, the promise of the house of Judah, is only applicable to after Mashiach comes, and not before Mashiach. However, I did see that the Shloach HaKadosh and Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, they have a fascinating response, which I think is very intriguing and mind-boggling. It's not something that I would ever anticipate, but they say that there's nothing wrong with the fact that the Levites took the house of royalty from Judah. They said because the house of royalty of Judah itself emanates and stems and is derived from none other than the Levites. How is that? Tamar! Right? There's a union, it seems to be illicit, but obviously it's very, very deep, exceptionally deep and profound, the union between Yehuda, Judah, and Tamar. And Tamar was a daughter of the first Kohen of Shem. So you see that the house of royalty really is a derivative, it really is derived from none other than the house of Kahuna. Furthermore, Aaron, who was Aaron's wife? Aaron's wife was Nachshon's sister, Elisheva, was Nachshon, Aaron, the high priest. He was the brother-in-law of Nachshon, who came straight from the royal house of Judah. So you see that there was always a hybrid. There was always an amalgam. There was always a collaboration, a partnership. And therefore, it would not be considered to be sacrilege for the Chashmonaim to become the royal house. Very, very fascinating. But I have to share with you the fact that Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, the great Reb Tzadok, fascinating biography if you read the life about Reb Tzadok. I suggest everybody research the life of Reb Tzadok. I don't have time, unfortunately, because we're almost out of time to speak about the biography of Tzadok. But he says that Chalila, this is what he says, that heaven forbid, God forbid, Chas v'shalom, he says, to say that Misha Asa Teshua, that the ones that cause the salvation, the miracle for the Jewish people, that there should be no remnant and no vestige of them, he says it's impossible. He says that after Herod, he said Herod did not succeed in exterminating the whole entire house of Hashmonaim. He says there were those that escaped, and there were those, but they lived under the radar as long as Herod was alive and his successors, whatever it was, and therefore they were alive, but they weren't meforsim, they weren't public. He says, and therefore they certainly were. So I think that it's incumbent upon us, when we light the menorah tonight, we have an opportunity. It's an amazing opportunity. Chanukah's coming, just a few hours. Imagine that. We're going to bring down the light. You know, they say, bring the house down. We're not bringing the house down. Listen, I hope we bring that. When I refer to bring the house down, I mean not the house of David, well, the house of David, but also the third temple. We want to bring the house down. Let's bring the house down. Amen. But we're going to bring the light down tonight. We're going to bring the light down. We're going to bring the light that was hidden away, that Adam was privy to. Only Adam was privy to. But we're going to be privy to that light. And we understand that we're not lighting all 8 candles tonight like Shpei Shammai did. He lit all 8 candles because of Sukkos, because Chanukah is a substitute for Sukkos. We're not going to take the lulav. Okay, listen, anybody that takes a lulav when they're lighting the menorah tonight, all right, listen, we spoke about the source earlier. We said there is a source to do it. Maybe it's not a bad idea. But I don't know. If you do it really privately, okay? Close your shades, somebody's going to think you're crazy. When somebody's going to think it's Palm Sunday, something, whatever it is called, Don't do it, okay. I don't know. Maybe taking a rub or something. But anyhow, you got to understand. It's equivalent to the oxen that were brought. Polchos v'holech. And there's so much beauty. There's so much holiness. Tremendous, tremendous holiness. So, all I could say is that you're a Maccabee. Be on God's side. As we started out, that today, the Jewish people, we're losing our flavor. We're losing our spice. We're no longer associated. We're associated with Hollywood. We're associated with real estate. We're associated with finance. We're associated with sushi. And that's not us. That's not us. We're the moral beacons. We're supposed to be the ones that fight the Yetzer Hara. We're supposed to be the ones that work on our characters. We're supposed to be the ones that illuminate the world, that make the world shine. And you are the Maccabee of today. So happy Freilichen Lichten, have a wonderful Chanukah. Thank you for listening. Anybody has any questions, please, don't hesitate. That's what we're here for. And Nishkach, thank you for listening. Thank you for coming. Okay. Oh, you don't have to, please. Oh, okay.
Very illustrious year. Illustrious.
Really a happy family.
Be well. Enjoy your donuts. They look very enticing. I almost took one.
Very illustrious.